Hey everyone, welcome to another episode of the Afterlife podcast. This is your host, Pooja Chilukuri. I'm very excited and honored to have my guest today, Kimberly Braun. Kimberly Braun is a minister, MA, Reiki Master, author, speaker, retreat leader, meditation coach. Kimberly has spent over a decade as a monastic nun, exploring the path of presence. With a master's in theology, she lives to inspire others to connect to and live from divine love at their center. Kimberly is a TEDx speaker and former meditation faculty at the renowned Omega Institute. She has served tens of thousands through her writing, speaking, retreats, online courses, and community, and has 2 new books in 2023, Miracles in the Naked Light. And she is our guest today, and I'm very excited to have you, Kimberly. Thank you for coming on the show.
Thank you so much for having me. I feel very blessed that we connected the way we did at the conference, and it's leading to this.
Yes, I appreciate you coming on. And without wasting any more time, I would love for you to tell us about yourself. And I'm very curious to know what led you into the life of service as a Carmelite nun.
Right. And it's such a rich question because I think we're all called to tap into these deeper parts of ourselves. Why I'm here. What is my life about? And there's no right or wrong answer. There's only the right answer for us. All my life, from a very young age, I was experiencing what I would call the beloved in all sorts of areas of my life. In ritual, we were Catholic, and we were also very charismatic. So we were active with lots of forms of prayer and healing. And I would have experiences out in nature. And then I would have experiences right within just the setup of my life in family life. If you read my first book, you'll see some fun stories from my childhood. What it felt like was that I was being pursued by the beloved. And there's something really consoling to believe or experience that we're wanted, we're loved, we're seen, and I experienced that in a very heightened way. My natural response was a yes in response to that, because it satisfied my mind and my heart. And in that grew, and I discovered that I have a very rich, deep, mystical call. And that's my greatest service is embodying this presence of love more and more, and being a space holder for it so others can step into that in themselves. When I entered the monastery, my mystical experiences were taking me into very deep states, hours and hours at a time of ecstasy, with lots of miracles and visions and phenomena. And joining the monastery was the natural choice because it was clear that that's what my life was going to be about. And a monastery is a good place for that to happen. The rhythm of the lifestyle is conducive to that. The singularity of focus, the intensity of practice, the magnitude of the chant, all of those things really contributed to be a perfect place for me to encounter myself even more deeply, to encounter the eternal without limits and boundaries, and to grow in that space. And then to simultaneously be of service in the world through the prayer and meditation.
You know, I think I read your second book. I just realized that I read your second book, so I missed all the stuff in the first book. But one of the things that when I started reading it, I have to tell you, Kimberly, I was like, wow. I mean, who gets to experience that, hours of silence like that, and going deep into presence and being able to feel that connection, because we're so busy all the time. So you have actually motivated me to take some time off, to schedule silent time in my week. I just want you to know that. So thank you.
So glad.
Yes,
I'm so
thank
glad.
you. Thank you. Because even when I have my prayer time, I feel like I'm talking too much. But the silence is really the space where I could listen. I did. And so, what you talk about those mystical experiences and the deep connection. If it's okay with you, I would like to ask you about one of those that struck me. I think it was a moment that you had with Mary. It was in 1995. It's in your second book. Could you talk a little bit about that?
Yes. I've been experiencing the presence of spiritual beings all my life, and Mary's been one of them that's been a constant part. So when that story happened in 95, I had been a monastic nun for 4 years and a few months. And I was scrubbing the floor. I was communing in this silence. And I was oftentimes experiencing the presence of Mary, specifically Mary. So since then, that divine feminine has taken a multitude of forms. I've experienced Kuan Yin, even shape-shifting into Kuan Yin once when I was helping an older person. Oya, Yamana, Kali, Durga, all sorts of these feminine aspects of divinity. But of course, because of my setup, Mary was front and center for most of my life, and she still is a powerful part. And it was completely unsolicited. I was just scrubbing the floor, and I had no idea what was happening and what was going to come. But what happened as I was being called to the leader's office, the prioress, was something inward in me moved into a complete openness. So in our silence, we experience ourselves in a variety of states. Sometimes there's a simple quiet. Other times there's a robust sense of bliss. Other times there can be emptiness. There's a full range of states we experience in silence. Silence is not just one thing. And in this moment, I was in this silence, and I was very focused on the floor and being there with the floor. And I shifted to like a whoo. It was like, and I know in my book, I write about being a canvas, like an open canvas, but there was something very alive. It was like my whole being was like moved into this inner white light state. So I was in my body, but I wasn't aware of my body anymore. And then everything around me was reflecting that. Everything was kind of this shimmering white light. And time was moving in this kind of slowness to it. And so it was this white light. And I didn't know what was going to come. I mean, the state, just being in the state itself was so satisfying that nothing in me was like waiting for anything. I was just really happy in the state. But it primed me for then when I walked into that office, that picture of Mary just became alive. And the picture of Mary became an emanation of her. And then it was just simply me and her. And so sweet. Sweetness was the main quality there. And I heard the prioress talking, I heard what was being said, but I was really just in communication with Mary. It was like, and what's interesting is the prioress never said anything later, like, where were you? You weren't there. Somehow I was supported by spirit to be present with this leader in the community, even though I wasn't there. It was like I was in one place bilocating in the very one place.
You were tuning into a different channel.
Yes, totally.
Totally. Remind me, Kimberly, was that the time when you felt like you got the commission for that big project? Or was that a different occasion?
That came a different. So right in the beginning of the book in 95, I had, and you're right, because I had numerous experiences back to back. That one happened that actually was the call to go. And I put that in the introduction.
From North Dakota to your...
To Texas. Yeah, the call. And I want you to go. She said, I have a special love and I want you to go. Now, that going didn't leave me with a feeling of a particular mission other than just simply being another sister, another nun there. It didn't leave me feeling like I was going to lead or do something specific other than being a committed nun and fellow sister to the women in the community. Once I was down there, because I had just taken my vows for life, once I was down there, it was about 2 months later that we had the devotionals in October, which are every day about Mary. We do a rosary, and I started experiencing my crown chakra opening, and this whoosh would happen with her presence, and I would feel that the essence of her was rushing through my body, and I was taken into this kind of drunken state, and I gained more capacity so that it didn't overwhelm me like it did at the beginning. But my felt sense was Mary and I were like this. And we were separate, but we were also like this. The reflection that I got of that experience, the reflection was that one time when I was asked to go meet a visitor, and the visitor started crying because she said I looked just like Mary. And that let me know that what was happening was really Mary and I merging or shape-shifting, and very, very mysterious, not so much like a vision of Mary outside of me, like you have the reported visions that happen that are so beautiful, but almost like it was like, whew,
Like
I was Mary was me, I was in Mary was in me, but I didn't lose myself in it, but very mysterious. Yeah.
Yeah, it sounds like your consciousness was fused with hers, almost like like you're one. You're one. You're different, you're separate, but you're one. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
And that's happened with it. It's happened with Jesus as well at times, and it's happened with other beings that are not in form. So, there's something I think of my inner makeup that has a propensity towards that kind of shape shifting, if you will. But it's deeply healing for me too. Very simultaneously, both. It feels very private and personal, but then somehow in that it's of service. It's very mysterious, right?
It is. And it's magical too, isn't it? Yes, I totally understand. Sometimes it's hard to find words for these experiences. You know what you felt and what you saw and what you heard, and but it's very hard to translate that sometimes, I think, into language. Yeah. But depth, and speaking of translation and language, I have a curiosity question, and it's about the title of your book. It's Miracles in the Naked Light. What is the naked light?
Yes, isn't that a juicy statement? Thank you for asking. So the phrase in the naked light comes from the song Sounds of Silence. And when Simon and Garfunkel wrote that song, it's a beautiful song, but that line goes, and in the naked light I saw. Very beautiful. Now, my interpretation of it, I'm not purporting that it's their interpretation of it. But when I was hiking, I was reflecting, and that phrase kept popping up for me, that there is a luminosity of existence that we are in at every moment, every breath. And there is a way that at times we're perceiving it, and other times we're not perceiving it. And I hold that as true, but what I want readers to do is ask themselves, is that true? Because you may reflect on it and say, I don't think that's true. But wherever your answer lands, it's going to affect you. So if I hold that as true, then that means there is a certain miraculous nature to existence, to even being alive, everything being alive, creation being alive. And if that's so, then there is an actualization that's happening. There is a potentiality coming into form and actualizing. And if that's all so, then there's a whole different way we can be in life. My questions, because I believe it's true, revolve much more around how is it so? what is actually happening?
Mhm.
How can I open to it?
Mhm.
Versus if I'm standing apart from the question, I could maybe say, is it true? I'm not sure it's true. Whole different set of questions. So the book is intended, through all the miracles that are in that book, the book is intended to pull you into all the miracles I was experiencing inside and outside, so that you begin to taste, wow, is my life a series of miraculous happenings? And if so, what does that mean for me? Where can I find consolation? How can I open to it? So that's what I mean. And it harbors in that belief, and it begs the reader to kind of be a little more serious about their own answer to that
Yes.
postulation.
Thank you for explaining that. I know the book is full of miracles, full of miracles. I really, when I was going through it, after the first two or three, I was like, is this for real? Because it was so good. It was something is so good, it's just like, oh my goodness. And I know it's for real. I know it's for real, but it was just that was my the gut, the visceral response I had. But it was so beautiful, Kimberly. And I don't want to give it away, so I'm not gonna ask you about that. And that actually brings me to something you write in there. And you wrote about, every moment being grace, like of grace. And the reason my mind went and got stuck on that word is because in my background, I used to be a very religious person. I served 17 years in a fundamentalist Christian institution. And, ironically, I used to hear that word all the time. But
Mm,
somehow I feel like I never really understood it until after I left. And now, it's a part of my life, but I really wanted you to talk a little bit about that grace in every moment.
right. And I would love to. And as I launch more into that, would you share with me how your relationship has shifted around the word? And then I can speak to that.
Of course, of course. So, when I would hear it in that setting, it seemed like it was something that God was giving, but we were very unworthy and undeserving of it. And it was almost like he was doing you a favor. And I say he because that was how, I understand that God is source, universe, consciousness, but that's how I learned about God as this male entity. And then grace was like something that I almost got the impression that yes, it's there. And sometimes I would go into this cognitive dissonance where sometimes I would be able to relate with it as something very beautiful and very, something that is sustaining everything. But then most of the time it would come with this little bit of connotation, like it's almost like I'm unworthy and it's something that, you know what I mean? Like, okay, I don't deserve it, but now he's given it to me, so I better be grateful, like that. And it's not a very healthy, I don't think it's a very healthy way of, relating with that word. But and I know what I think about that word now, but I want to hear your take on it.
Sure.
I am so grateful actually that I've transitioned from that, and that word means a lot to me. But the reason I wanted your take on, Kimberly, I think you're an awesome teacher. I mean, I've just heard a little bit of your video, like the TED Talk video. And some of my audiences are people that may have had religious trauma or have some kind of a distorted view of God. And so if you can bring that word to us in a different light, in
Yeah,
the naked light.
I love that. And thank you so much for sharing. Unsolicited by me ever, and I've been out of the monastery now for 22 years. I have been at the service of that healing process more than once, because it's so deep in the Western psyche. There's a certain dualism that has taken deep root that separates the person from themselves and casts a light called unworthiness, right? So I'm not foreign to that. And I'm of the Western psyche. So I have had my own healing process in ways around that. What I have experienced, and I think we really grow in freedom from our experience and our reflection on our experience. So even when we hold something as true, that holding is a pointer towards an experience and opens us to ourselves. So beliefs are meant to always be changing because we're growing in what we call truth. And when I'm talking about grace, and I have an online spiritual community, and we took this topic this month and had a very dynamic conversation because it's kind of a complex word. And what are we really talking about, right? What are we pointing to? And what I'm speaking of is, let's take it out of its general statement and let's make it personal. Everything is grace for me. What I believe is being imported there is the call to awaken that my very coming into being is a movement called grace. So my very being alive is in, for, and as grace. And it is both my makeup, but it is also the container in which I'm in. So everything in my awakening process, everything in my relationship with the world, with myself, with the divine, with God, everything is this engagement that's happening, brimming in grace. And grace is like an ingredient of eternal light that allows us to taste the beauty of who and what we are. And those are really lofty words, but if we hold that in its loftiness and let it come really close to us, especially in places that cause us suffering, not where we put it on. Like in my introduction, I talk about how easy it would be to use a phrase like that to repress the real circumstances of our life, or to bypass it, or to diminish the impact. But what grace does is grace provides the container where we can get so close, get very intimate with things, with life, even with terrible things happening in the world. I mean, everything. And getting close with it, we experience that even that is held and seen. And when we experience that that is held and seen, there is something in us that shifts. And in the shifting, we have something that we call insight or wisdom or healing or compassion or transformation. So I see grace as this kind of this setup and this agency that allows us to awaken within it. And I think, yeah, and I love, if I can just add on, if you look at the mystics of any tradition, Christianity, Buddhism, Hinduism, Zoroastrianism, like all traditions, and I know I didn't say the last one correctly, you will discover that each of those individuals started out on a path where their beliefs were the kind of setup that opened them up to something transcendent. And then as they experienced it, they shifted more. And they maybe moved from unworthiness to essential worthiness. You know, Teresa of Avila, a fellow Carmelite, Spanish mystic, you know, if you look at her writings, you would think she thought she was a piece of dirt. Me, the unworthy woman that I am. I mean, her language is abrasive for us, especially as women evolving in our world today. Then you look more closely and you see where she discovers that her very essence, she says, is so completely untainted that the soul doesn't need healing. It is untainted and pure and beautiful. And her discovery leads her in the self-discovery process where she comes to the total freedom that she is beautiful without any doubt. So our process, our beliefs take us down that road. And when we let them fall away, when they don't serve us anymore, we can evolve into a new belief system, into a new place.
A new place. Yes. And that actually, Kimberly, thank you so much for explaining that. So I'm glad I let you talk about that topic. And so this does lead me to my next question, though, talking about spiritually, evolving. You've always had mystical experiences, but one more thing that I gathered from your book also was in some ways, that building project that you were in charge of, I felt like that wasn't just construction of a monastery. In some ways, I felt that your spiritual life was also changing, or how because your spiritual experiences, did that come up against religious obligations? Sometimes do you feel that, because reading your book, I felt like there may have been some deconstruction of structure.
Right. I love the way you just said that, because a building is so structured. So you've got a
Yes.
monastery that's structured, and I was being deconstructed in that process. Do you know, I believe that happened. And I believe it happened in a super gentle way. I didn't beat up against direct tensions. I absolutely loved being Carmelite. I loved being a contemplative. I loved everything of the setup.
Mhm.
And what happened is, after I took solemn vows, you move into a place where you have a little bit, not a lot more of a voice because it's hierarchical, but you do have a little bit more of a voice in community.
Mhm.
And in that, I was presencing myself. And if you
Mm.
read the whole book, you will find that more than once I come up against, am I compromising my spirit? Am I compromising my integrity? Am I
Mm.
compromising who I am and what I am?
Mhm.
But there was a gentleness in that wrestling because I felt so called. And then what happened at the same time were very simple movements of spirit. When I was doing the building project, I was discovering new ways that spirit was embodied
Mm.
in me, in it. Now, I feel that because of my love with Jesus
Mhm.
that led me into the monastery, that I had a very embodied incarnational spirituality. It was very grounded. It sounds like being in a monastery, you're leaving the world or you're
Mhm.
leaving the material, but I didn't experience that. I experienced in my body
Mhm.
and in community and in relationship. But there were these subtle ways that it was taking on a new nuance. Like
Mhm.
I would talk about a shop drawing, and some healing would take place in that conversation for me and the person I was talking to. There was this inner movement of spirit that was happening that, unknown to me, was changing me.
Mhm.
And I think that change was not that I was in something that wasn't working and I needed to move out. The change was happening as this was my yes, and now my yes was taking on. It's like if you're uh, rowing a boat down a stream, and then you're rowing it down this one canal, and then you're aware you're meant to go down a different canal, but you're still in the boat and you're still on the stream.
Mhm.
It was like this evolution for me personally. And there were powerful moments because the miracle of the project was not lost on me. I was there for it. And I began to notice how not everybody was there for the miracle of the project.
Mhm.
Not everybody had the capacity
Mhm.
to be there for the miracle of the project, because that's what we are as human beings. We're somewhere on the spectrum between love and fear. And so you are right. I was being totally deconstructed, but I didn't know it, because all I felt was that I was doing things for the beloved, for my community, being in the flow.
Yep.
So, yeah.
Yes. But thank you for sharing all of your journey, Kimberly. I think even though I've never been a nun, but I felt like it was very relatable. So thank you for writing your book. And I
Oh,
do have one last question because we're running out of time. I want to ask you so many, but I don't know if you know, but I've written all your quotes from your book here because yeah, I like to write by hand. I like to write by hand because I feel like if I do that, I remember things better. And so I wrote a few quotes and I'm going to read one of them. And I'm actually going to ask you to comment on it because I do think that at this time in the world, to this morning, even before this recording, my heart was a bit heavy because of everything that's going on, on this globe. And sometimes I can't do anything about it, but that's the perfect time for me to go within and, do those prayers or find that grounding. But you actually have something in your book that has encouraged me. And this is what you say. You say, contrasting words such as dark and light may engender a desire for one and not the other. But it is in both that we experience the beloved.
Right.
And so if you want to comment on that and just, a few words, just to inspire us for these times.
Yes, you brought up something so great. And I too am humbled by the state of affairs that we keep seeming to circle around these patterns of fear impelled division. We're still there. And what it says to me is that we are still very young in our growth, in our evolution as a humanity. And we are all part of the same humanity. We are very young. And there's a beautiful line in Psalm 19. Day unto day tells the story, and night unto night reveals the message. And commenting on that in relation to that quote, the day is the light. Don't we all love that? Like when everything's like peace and harmony and so much love, it's so clear it's meant to be. And that is so nourishing for us. And we're meant to say yes to those things, but we're meant to equally recognize that the night reveals the message. And what is revealing? Revealing is something that comes forward that was shrouded from our sight. And if it's shrouded from our sight, then that means we can't know what it is. And I think that's the call when we encounter what we might frame as darkness, unfortunate happenings, atrocities, violence, that there is something about that the light is shrouded, and even the word light falls short. The luminous nature, the eternal being is shrouded. And it's shrouded from our understanding as well, which allows me to humble myself before it and get really intimate with it, not stand back from it and judge it. Because if we do that, then we're just setting ourselves up for that happening to ourselves as well. But get really close to it and hold space so that it can reveal itself. I think how I might liken it is, now I'm not blessed to have children, but I love children. And when I see parents who are with their children, when the children goes through something rough, let's say the children gets really upset about something and it gets angry, like, oh, I wanted that, like, just really comes from a place that's more violent than happy. When I see parenting that holds that child right where they're at and gets close with the child, what happens? What's under all that in the child very often comes forward because there's safety and no judgment. It comes forward, and then that can be healed. Like the child may be afraid that they're never going to ever get a cupcake again. And so they're getting angry about not getting a cupcake. Yeah, it's simplistic, but I think that's relatable. And that's what I'm pointing to with the way we can use these words that divide us and how we're called to go move on a deeper level in relation to them.
That's one beautiful, Kimberly. And I think you also said earlier about the spectrum of love and fear. I think we're all on that journey. And I really, really appreciate you taking the time to come and speak with us today. I want to encourage everybody that's watching and listening, please find Kimberly's website and her book, and, even just her website. It's just so full of inspiring messages. So I want people to go there, find you. I'll have all of the links in the show notes, Kimberly, and all of your social media links and where to find you and your work. Thank you, and thank you.
Thank you so much. And just so everybody knows, you can get it audio read by me, My
Yeah.
publisher did that, ebook and print. And it has been such an honor. The phrases you pulled forward gave such a great opportunity for us to be together on such a deep heart level. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you for taking your time to be with us and teach us.